In recent times, it has been said very often that computer games are not created solely to have fun. In some cases, apart from the pleasure of playing, the productions we play can provide us with some interesting history lessons, sometimes usable knowledge, and sometimes also many educational things. In all this, there are also extremely controversial topics. The developers must then bear in mind that when dealing with a given controversial issue, they must be careful not to overdo it, thus causing a similar scandal as it was with the hot coffee featured in GTA San Andreas. One such video game, which very well presents a very important problem that unfortunately is still part of our present world, is GTA 4. The creators presented in this production the issues of terrorism in a very interesting way, for example, based on the stories of some of the characters in the game. At first glance, it may not seem to be such an extensive thread, but after a closer look, we can once again see that the saying, "appearances can be deceiving," perfectly translates into reality here. In addition, this topic is so extensive that we have to divide it into two parts, but in what convention the second part will be, you will find out soon. Welcome back to the Gaming Investigators channel, and without further ado, let's get to work. The first item in our analysis today will be to discuss the first signs of terrorism in Liberty City. We're going to start with something hard to miss, but for the episode to be complete, we just have to mention it. We are talking about Niko Bellic's conversation with his cousin Roman during the mission, The Cousins Bellic, which takes place shortly after the platypus is docked in Liberty City. When Niko lands in a completely new place, he wants to see the area. It was his first time in this city, so it was logical that he wanted to look around. But as it turns out quickly, it may not be that simple.
Why don't you show me around the city?
Fucking terrorists!
What?
Terrorists! There's been a big scare and you can't go across the bridges so good. You without the visa, I would stay in Broker. Fucking stay in Hove Beach. Everyone like us does.
Exactly. The problem is terrorists. If Roman's statement is interesting for a player, he can go to an internet cafe to surf the internet, which will surely satisfy his curiosity a bit with several articles devoted to this event. So, here's the first publication on our list that comes from the Liberty Tree newspaper, titled Bomb.com. In the article itself, which can quickly catch our attention, is the following passage. Officials speaking on the condition of anonymity said that, while they don't speak Arabic, the chit-chat they heard was something like slalom, which rhymes with dirty bomb. Of course, apart from the humorous aspect, we think that the creators here referred to the famous event on September 11, perpetrated by the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. Moving on, another interesting article comes from Weasel News. The publication is called Dirty Bomb Threat. The newspaper mentions that it all started with an entry on one of the internet blogs where the author warns of the impending bomb attack on Liberty City. As you can see right away, we have a completely different narrative here. That's because, in the previous article, it was mentioned that the conversations of several people of unknown identity were overheard. So, there are several possible premises, which were the consequences of the closure of bridges between the islands of the city. The situation is equally interesting in the case of the last publication, which this time comes from the Public Liberty online newspaper. In this article, we also have the aforementioned potential internet threat as the reason for closing bridges in the city, so we can already see that the city authorities took such reports very seriously. By the way, we would like to share with you a curiosity that has nothing to do with today's topic. Nevertheless, it is worth mentioning because some of them connect this issue with the topic of terrorism in GTA 4 when, in reality, it's not true. Getting to the point, there's a certain website in the game that you must not visit. The site was dedicated to children who competed in various beauty contests as so-called pageants, which can be deduced from the link itself. If Niko decides to break the ban and enter the website, a moment later he will get 4 stars of the wanted level on his account. If we were to explain why we are suddenly wanted, here's what we have. Namely, from the Weasel News announcement, we can hear that the LCPD services decided to set up this website on purpose to find potential pedophiles.
Weasel News. Are you a sex offender? That's the question many police are asking residents. And they've even set up a website, littlelacysurprisepageant.com, to catch them. It's a town on edge as people wonder if their father, best friend, or even spouse is a sex offender.
The problem is you, the news media. So what if a man pleasures himself in public? Sometimes you have to take care of business. Comprende?
In short, law enforcement will likely recognize Niko Bellic as a potential pedophile when he enters the website. Therefore, actions are immediately taken to capture the man. Moving on and coming back strictly to terrorism, a very important source of information on this topic is the Weasel news station. While playing this game, you can hear a lot of different messages that concern not only matters that arise from some story missions, but also something else. Anyway, the first of the messages that caught our attention was about the Jingoism Act. Namely, shortly after the bridges in the game are closed, the current US President, Joe Lawton, at least in this game, signed the Jingoism Act, further renewed by Congress, which was to be the government's firm response to the controversy over terrorism in Liberty City. The document will allow law enforcement agencies to start spying on citizens to help locate terrorists. In addition, the law also demands from citizens to speak well of America, but this point was probably meant to be some kind of a joke on the part of the developers. Moving on, another point worth mentioning is the announcement by George W. Bush of the so-called War on Terror in response to the recent events of September 11th in New York City. The report presented by Mike Whitley clearly shows that it was Liberty City that suffered the most from the implementation of the Bush anti-terrorist campaign. Furthermore, one journalist mentions that some government sources openly believe that probably 9 out of 10 terrorists target Liberty City among all the rest of the United States. In the meantime, it's time to move on to the final part of this episode, which is a few story missions for United Liberty Paper. The first task that is directly related to the discussed issue is the mission called Portrait of a Killer. In this quest, our task is to track down and get rid of Adam Dimayev, a Russian criminal who finances terrorist activities in Liberty City. Not only that, according to the LCPD database, the man is wanted by the Russian government for financing terrorist activities in the Caspian Sea region. It is also worth mentioning that the LCPD services noted that Adam is suspected of being the head of a car-stealing ring based in Dukes. This is justified because the man has recently been hanging around Kamayshev Import-Export, where stolen vehicles are presumably imported, which are then exported to other parts of the world. In turn, the second, and to be honest, the last thread from United Liberty Paper are the missions Dust Off and Paper Trail. This time, our goal is to eliminate Edward Borodin, a Russian multi-billionaire who, like Adam Dimayev, is very eager to support terrorist activities in Liberty City and the entire United States. Interestingly enough, after completing this mission, we can see the article and hear the announcement in various media, such as Weasel News or the Liberty Tree newspaper. Both messages are about the murder.
Weasel News.
A helicopter explosion just south of Algonquin has claimed the life of a Russian businessman.
Edward Borodin died in a helicopter crash just south of Algonquin. Although some eyewitnesses suggested foul play and a dogfight between this and an unknown helicopter, local FIB officials tell me this was just an accident. One representative said it's clearly a tragic accident, and due to the increased terror threat, some citizens are suffering from hysterical hallucinations. Mike Whiteley, Weasel News.
What is most interesting, however, is that we learn a bit about Edward's business plans. The man, among other things, wanted to buy a section of Middle Park to build his new, very luxurious mansion there. Unfortunately, the mayor of the city, Julio Ochoa, did not agree to this, and therefore, Borodin had to look for another land for his villa. In addition, there were even rumors that the businessman wanted to buy out the Liberty City Cox sports team, but from what we know, it all ended in negotiations. It is worth emphasizing, however, that undertaking this type of investment in Liberty City did not only serve to emphasize its prestige among the city's residents. This was primarily intended to distract law enforcement, as by handing money over to terrorists, the man somehow made city authorities take an interest in him. The obvious questions then arise as to what the money went to, especially since it was not a small sum at all. Therefore, Edward Borodin decided to use the market for this, thanks to which he could overstate the costs incurred, including the amounts allocated to terrorist organizations. The situation here will be different, as all costs will be in line, and the IRS will mistakenly believe that all costs come from legitimate activities such as investments. Summing up today's episode, we can say that terrorism is one of the most important threads that appear in GTA 4. From the very beginning, the creators provide us with a lot of various curiosities, which in turn more or less develop the entire lore of the game. As we mentioned at the beginning, one interesting thing remains to be discussed, but because it is as complex as the entire video today, we'll talk about it in a separate one instead. Meanwhile, if you want to learn more about the world of Grand Theft Auto, we invite you to watch the video which is currently being displayed on the screen. Also, remember to rate the episode. Take care, and see you soon.